Perfect. All right, then we're going to kick off. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. It's great to see that so many of you were interested in this webinar today. We are going to be talking about how to build your own extension to Autodesk Forma, which is a topic that has been requested by quite a few of our clients. So excited to be speaking about that topic today. My name is Katarina. I work in our customer-facing team here in Forma, and I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Marte and Håvard, who, like me, are based in Oslo in Norway. And yeah, perhaps I can give the word over to you, Marte, and you can introduce yourself first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marte, and I work on expanding and building our community of developers and also users of Forma. I'll be talking a little bit about how we can support you when you get started on building extensions. Håvard?
Yeah, I'm a software engineer, been here with the company for 6 years through an acquisition from SpaceMaker, and currently focusing on building extension APIs and learning what people need, what they want to build, how they can build new workflows, and trying to get them to be able to do that successfully.
Fantastic. I'm very glad that you're both here today, and we hope to be able to answer as many of your questions as possible as we go through. So before we begin with the kind of main part of the webinar, we can share some practical information. And the first thing is that the webinar is going to be recorded today, or it is being recorded today, and it will be shared with you afterwards, both on email, but also we will publish it on our webinar landing page, which is where you can go to watch previous recordings, also of other webinars like our onboarding webinars, and it's also where we publish upcoming webinars, so do check that out. Secondly, feel free to ask us questions throughout the webinar in the Q&A. We will try to answer as many of them as possible throughout, and we also have some dedicated time at the end. And thirdly, please join us in the developer forum or in the community more generally, but perhaps for the participants in this room, especially the developer forum, where you can ask questions, share knowledge, and also discuss popular API topics that come up. So perhaps Marte or Håvard can share a link to the developer forum in the chat if you haven't already. So the agenda for the webinar today will be as follows. First, we're going to talk a little bit high level about Forma strategy and philosophy around extensions, and why in many ways we rely on third parties to help us build Forma in a great way. Then secondly, we're going to give some examples of extensions that have already been developed by third parties. And we're going to use two examples to show that. Firstly, the Thicket Tree extension by Nathaniel Green, and also the Navigate outdoor area analysis that's been developed and recently released as a beta version by Symmetry. So we'll talk you through those just to give some inspiration, and then we're going to move over to the practical part where we share tips on how to actually get started if you're interested in building your own extension. So Håvard will speak about that, and Marte will talk about our community and support options as well. And then at the end, as I mentioned, we'll do a Q&A. And I always feel like I have to apologize about this slide. I know it's a very corporate wall of text, but since we are presenting product capabilities or software capabilities, and we may talk about things that are in development and make forward-looking statements, is one of those slides that we always have to include. And what it essentially says is that anything that we say regarding our plans for future development is not to be taken kind of as a guarantee, but it's a reflection of our best judgment and like known factors. So just keep that in mind as we go through today. So before we dive into the extensions themselves, we can spend a few minutes explaining how our extension strategy is key to developing Forma. And some of you may have seen this slide before. It's basically showing what Forma is today, and that is a cloud-based software for planning and early stage building design that provides both decision support capabilities in the form of different analyses that are relevant for the early phases of design, and also conceptual design capabilities where you can draw and model concepts and get insights into these. And right now, Forma is best suited for early volume and feasibility studies, as I mentioned, but the vision longer term is really to expand the capabilities of Forma, as you can see from the illustration here, to also include other verticals like water and transport, as well as later project phases. And our ultimate goal is for Forma to become a platform and an industry cloud for AECO, so architecture, engineering, construction, and operations. And this vision will take a long time to realize, as you can imagine. And it means that we're developing Forma in an iterative way at the moment, gradually adding capabilities that you can see visualized in these little hexagons on the illustration. But there's a lot of white space and there's a lot of room between the hexagons here. And this is where there's a huge opportunity, we think, for our partners and third-party providers to supplement Forma with lots of cool value-adding tools. And here's another quite busy illustration that I'll try to talk you through. The illustration here highlights the platform thinking, and it shows the kind of core components of Forma today, divided into these three main themes of contextual data, design automations, and analyses. And at the top, you see the Forma native capabilities. So these are kind of the core capabilities that we develop ourselves. And below the Forma native capabilities, you can see examples of how the third-party ecosystem is supplementing Forma with, for example, additional data providers. We have a collaboration with Regrid in the United States, who provide property boundaries, Kartverket here in Norway, who also provide important data when you set up a site. And then on the authoring environment side, we're building integrations with Revit and Rhino, for example. But we also have a good collaboration with TestFit, who've made their parking solution available through Forma, and Shapediver, whose building generator is available through Forma. And then finally, on the analysis front, which is really such a core part of the whole Forma software, the fact that you can get early insights into things like sun and noise and microclimate and make informed decisions in early stage design. There is an opportunity for third parties to provide, especially I think, more localized analyses that maybe we don't have the bandwidth to work on ourselves at the moment, but that can provide a lot of value for customers in specific regions. And this is where the symmetry outdoor area analysis extension has been really valuable, and that we'll talk about later on. And I think a takeaway from this session is we really hope that you want to help us extend this ecosystem and be part of it. And the three themes here, contextual data, design and automations, and analyses, are directions of clear value that we see, but we also are open for extensions that don't necessarily fall within one of these buckets. So let's share some examples of cool third-party extensions that have been developed. And I'm also going to try to do a little demo of how they work. And the first one that I want to talk about is the thicket vegetation extension that's been developed by a software engineer and hobbyist called Nathaniel Green. And when working in Forma, he noticed that the Forma native vegetation feature, which some of you might have tried, was somewhat limited. And therefore, he decided to build his own extension to provide more flexible ways of designing and placing trees, essentially, in Forma. And with this extension, the user has a lot more control over things like the shape of the canopy and the trunk and the color of the vegetation. You can adjust, heights and widths, and also place vegetation much more specifically on a point and click way, so that you can have more control over where you're adding your vegetation. So with that, I am going to try to swap my screen. So here you can see a demo project. This is a site in Oslo. It's actually the architecture and design school for anyone local who are joining us. And I want to show you, first of all, where you can find the Thicket extension and other extensions for that matter. On the left-hand side, we have our proposal list, we have our library, and then the third icon down is the extensions icon. And if you click Add Extensions, it will open a library of extensions that are currently available for clients to add to Forma. So there's lots of cool extensions here, and right at the bottom there is one called Thicket. And I have already added this to this project, and it has appeared, as you can see here, in my left-hand menu right at the bottom. So if I open the Thicket extension, it will look like this. And in this project, you can see I've already added quite a lot of different vegetation. We've got our pine trees, we've got some more column-shaped trees here, different shapes, sizes, canopies, got a mix and match of different colors over here. I've just basically placed them out. And you can see the different types of vegetation that I've drawn on the left-hand side. So if I wanted to create a new area or a new type of tree, I can click New Area. We can say that this is a birch tree, for example, causing a lot of allergy at the moment for me personally with the pollen season. And then we can say the spacing between them should be, say, 5 meters from canopy to canopy. And then we can add the tree type and begin to choose things like the canopy shape. Maybe this is going to be a globular shape, 6 meters tall, maybe 5 meters wide. You can choose the trunk and the height of the trunk, let's say 5 meters there. And then we can place the tree, either a single tree or a group of trees, which I'm going to use in this case, out in Forma, like this. And then here you can see the results. And of course, I can go in and amend things like the color and the trunk shape and so on if I want to amend that later on. But I think that's a really cool example of someone who's identified a need in Forma and then gone ahead and built it himself. So that's the Thicket extension. The second extension that I wanted to talk to you about, let me see now if I can share the correct screen again, is the Navigate outdoor area analysis that's been developed by Symmetry. And it was actually released, I think today or yesterday, as a beta analysis available to all users. So this webinar came at a good time. And the analysis lets you assess your site's compliance with outdoor area requirements that are particularly strict here in Scandinavia and perhaps especially in Norway. And it's a really good example of a more local analysis that's been developed by Symmetry, whose customers will benefit greatly from this extension, and it's been highly requested. So let's dive into what that looks like. I'm going to go back into my project, and I've already added this analysis from the Extensions tab. You can see it in the Navigate Outdoor Area extension right at the top, and it looks like this when you open the panel. I'm just going to go into a 2D view and center my site, because what we're interested in here is the outdoor space in pink here. And what you can do is you can type in an outdoor area target in terms of the amount of area that you want as a percentage of your gross floor area, or BTA, as we say in Norway. And then you can see to what extent the target has been, or the requirement has been achieved. We can also look at a sun requirement. So for example, if there is a requirement for, or that 50% of this area has to be sunlit on a specific date within a specific time interval, or at a specific time. I'm choosing 3 o'clock here. You can run the sun analysis at this time, and then that will be subtracted from the requirement. So if we give this a couple of seconds to run or to rerun, then we will see the result here in a second. And now you can see we're still within the requirement. 116% of the sun requirement has been fulfilled. And the green areas that you see on site now are kind of our valid areas, and the red ones are the areas that are not valid. We can do the same for noise, which I won't show now, but you can start to filter out both sun and noise requirements from the overall target, and always make sure that you're meeting the requirements. So a really good example here of a more localized analysis that, who knows, it might be also globally applicable, but right now it's especially relevant for the Norwegian market. All right. Then I'm going to go back into the presentation and share a final example just as inspiration. And this is an extension that was developed by a really cool group of people during a hackathon that we hosted here in Oslo a few weeks ago, where software developers and architects joined us from all over the world, I think, to see what extensions we could develop if we put our minds together. And the winning team, whose names you can see in the top right-hand corner, they developed a connection between Grasshopper and Forma, which made it possible to run the Forma wind comfort simulation that you can see here directly in Rhino. So whilst this is not itself available through the software, it is a really cool example, I think, of what can be achieved if we put our minds together, and they achieved this in just a couple of days of hacking. So with that, I think I'm going to hand over to you, Håvard, and you're going to share your screen.
Yep. And I guess a shout out to Philip, who's in the webinar, who attended that hackathon and made that hack. So next up is how to get started. Let's see. So there are two main ways of interacting with Forma to build extensions. The first one is to use our JavaScript SDK. That lets you build out UI inside of the browser and interact with Forma through JavaScript methods. The second one is to call our HTTP API, which is called the Forma API. It is also part of what the larger Autodesk calls the APS API. So I just want to show you things. So I just want to give you a live demo of how easy it is to get started and build. And the easiest thing is to build on top of our SDK. So there's a URL here at the bottom that will be shared with this presentation, which is a open source extension that we made. It's the Sun Study extension that's available inside of Forma. So what I did was to just toned this down, so I have this as a starting point, but I removed all of that to have a empty extension. The second thing I did prior to this meeting was to make my own test extension. Now you can do that through creating your own extension here, but you've seen I've clicked this button too many times already. So I'm not clicking the create new right now, but you'll end up in this screen where you configure your extension. And in this view, you get the ID, and you also configure your placement. When you looked at Katrina's demos right before this, you saw that the thicket extension was in the left-hand side of Forma, and the outer area was in the right-hand side. I'll show you where those can be, where you can place your code, but this is where you configure those things. So I have my local testing extension set up here. And I also have a web server running locally, which is just standard JavaScript tooling for starting the project that I showed you that I downloaded. So the next thing I can do is to just interactively jump into my code. And with these small steps set in place, this extension is running. And as you can see on the left-hand side, it's automatically updating and running the code as I write it out. So we're using a lot of the built-in JavaScript awesomeness here. So for example, I can go and see on the Forma API, what's my current project. I'll get the project ID, or I can explore what other options there are to me here. Like we have access to some things that's in the scene, like the sun. So I always love playing around with this, where I can do a quick and dirty sun analysis, where I just say, set the date to new date. And then I'll see that the sun date in Forma changes, or I can just run a small for loop here. Let's see. And Copilot has learned how to write these examples, but because I've been doing them so many times. So I'm missing one thing here, and then we'll have a small example that runs for every hour, set the sun position. And this paired with a export image is essentially the sun study example that we have in Forma today. I wanted to show you, and so now you can see that you can easily interact with the scene. You have Forma camera here, where you can change the location of the camera. You can do design tools. So from the thicket extension, you could see that it was able to draw into the scene and request drawing. The drawing tools live inside Forma, but you can use this API. So let's say that we want the user to draw an polygon. We can go ahead and do that, call this method, which will change to the polygon drawing tool. When the drawer user closes the polygon, I'll receive these coordinates. Further from this, you have this little fun API where I can get all of the geometry from Forma. So here is the triangulated geometry in the scene. So that lets you know that you can get at the geometry in different data types. You can also easily render geometry back. So I can do Forma render. Did I forget it now? Okay, so my brain is right. Yeah, you have this API where you can render these things back into Forma. And then the last thing I wanted to show from the API surface before we jump back into the presentation is that you can also do Forma.analysis. Don't know when, yeah. And then you can get at the analysis that has been run on the Forma platform, and you can get at the results formats for the sun analysis and the noise analysis currently. And we're looking into building out that feature to support more. So if we go back here, you can see that right now what we call entry points into the to the UI is either these panels where you can place UI in this floating model that I showed just now, or the left or the right menu. We have data orders, which gives you a bit more UI, so that we request the user to draw where in the world they want to order data, and we'll call your APIs with that polygon to ask you to return data. Or you have something that I'll demo in 2 seconds, is that you can write code that turns into new tooling in Forma. And this is the link to our main documentation page where you can learn more. So I said there are 2 ways. I'm mostly focusing on the SDK today. I'll just briefly tell you that over the APIs, we've ourselves built the Revit and the Rhino extension, and we're starting to build more extensions solely using the APIs. So now I'll just go through a few of our extensions and talk a bit more in detail on how these are employing our APIs. So the first one is the Shape Diver extension, which is a tool, like I talked about earlier. So what essentially is happening here is that we are providing a drawing tool and some UI for configuring, and then Shape Diver, which is a service in the cloud that runs grasshopper definitions on their server, retrieves a request from us to generate some geometry, and they hand back geometry to us, and we create elements in the scene based on this geometry. The second example I have here of the other tool is the test fit parking generator, which is similar in nature, where you get a drawing tool in the scene. However, this is running interactively inside the browser, but this is still test fits code running as an extension inside Forma. So those 2 examples are similar, but one is done at the server and the other is done inside the browser. The Thicket extension that Katrina showed off is doing something similar as the test fit extension, but I think this is a nice example of using our APIs to create specialized geometry and pushing that into Forma. The outdoor area analysis by symmetry uses, I showed you that you could list out the analysis and get at the ground results. So what they are doing here is to trigger analysis from the extension. And then when the analysis returns, it's actually reading the point-by-point output of the analysis and then augmenting that with more meaning. So setting these boundaries. And then they're utilizing one of the render APIs that lets you render back an image onto the terrain. So that's how they actually put the red and green plot onto the terrain. And the Veras extension, which lets you render a AI generated image based on your current geometry, is simply using the get triangles method that I showed you earlier. That's almost the only integration they have into Forma, and then they're able to produce this image based on the geometry in the scene. And lastly, I think the Plex Earth extension, where they're fetching satellite images online and then downloading that to the extension, and then they're using the Forma render APIs to render images back onto our terrain, and that's how they achieve this effect. Yeah, I think so. I see there's a lot of questions, but I don't know if I need to take them. Are you able to answer all of them?
Not all of them, but we're plowing through. Do you have any ones, Martin, that you want to ask Håvard now, or should we wait till the end?
We can save them, I guess, to the yeah, let's do that.
Let's save them.
Okay. Cool. So then I hand it further to Marta to explain how to get further assistance from us, because yes, we've built a lot of tech, but we believe that we really need to connect to you and build relationships to make great extensions together.
Yes, I agree. Actually, Håvard, I think we should answer these questions now, because this one is a little different. So I don't know if you want to open the Q&A or if we should interview you.
Please do.
There's the first one there. Is Forma based on 3JS? And the upper,
Yes.
yeah.
So we don't expose 3JS through the extension SDK, but underneath it is 3JS that is running. The render APIs that I showed you, where you get the closest interactions, you can either provide triangulated geometry, but that's just floating point numbers, or you can load a GLB. So we'll be using 3JS's capabilities for loading GLBs underneath, but you don't really notice that, and that's because we want to be free to swap out 3JS if we please to in the future. I hope that's good enough answer.
Yep. We have another one from Sylvia. I wonder if this maybe is more of a Forma usage question, but is there a way to get the number of floors in a building? Yes.
Yes. So it kind of depends on the way that geometry originated inside Forma. So if it's a line building or a basic building, then you have a representation that you can read, which is called volume 2.5D, where you are able to infer this information. But if it's a mesh building coming from Shapediver or Revit, then we don't have that information currently, but we're working on building that out.
Great. Will we have a camera path set up apart from just taking or saving snapshots in the future?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So maybe just to expand on the camera API will actually change the location of the current camera for the user. So you can use it to have an animation. And then there's a separate API that lets you take a picture of what's in the scene right now. Follow up if I didn't answer your question with another information.
Okay, and then we have from Edwin, I have a question about one of the API methods. Is there a list of all the categories available for get paths by category, please? In the SDK documentation, I only see building and site limits.
Right. This goes at a core discussion we're having internally right now. So we don't have a complete list right now, and we kind of want people not to rely too heavily on these categories at the moment because it's a bit undecided where we're going. I would recommend using the existence of a representation as a differentiator between what you're doing. So a building would have 2.5D collection, for example, or a mesh, and a site limit would have a footprint. But I think I need to talk to you to go into detail on this question.
And you can maybe continue the conversation in the forum, or yeah, get the Håvard's number maybe. Good. Okay, there's another one from Chile. It would be interesting to have more global metrics, not partialized by project or proposal, but also metrics to understand, for example, how much has been modeled and proposed in form by categories of buildings, for example. It would also be interesting and super useful to be able to export the data generated to export to CSV or something similar. Also, the possibility of being able to take the proposal to Rhinoceros with the plugin and not only the contexts.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of these, and we're continuously working to expose more and more data.
Yep. Good suggestion. Yeah, this one I think maybe was answered written in a different form, but there's a need to have a to do comfort analysis of areas greater than a 0.5 mile radius. Could we build an extension or an overlay that expands that area? I don't know if you want to answer that live too.
Yes, there's been a hack on top of. So if you're okay with the predictive version of the comfort analysis, then you can do this yourself with an extension, because part of the SDK is the ability to run this predictive comfort analysis, and then you can choose the area yourself. The proper CFD taking an hour analysis running in the backend does not have an API to trigger it just yet, but we plan to do that in the future. So at that point, you could run multiple ones and then remap the output.
And then there's some more information about the camera path question. Yes,
yeah, I think I was able to answer that question. That's great.
Yep. Great. Can you load external libraries and use them?
Yeah. So when you deploy this, you're deploying your own web page, and you have total control over what you put in that code. So you can use the regular JavaScript package managers and deploy your external libraries with your code. You're perfectly able to do that.
Great. And now a good one. For extensions you potentially want to sell, should we use Autodesk App Store, or will Forma have its own marketplace?
Right. Very timely question. We're merging these two concepts as we speak. So there will only be one marketplace.
Stay tuned. Good. Did we miss something, Katarina?
No, I think all of them are answered. Well done.
Right. Keep them coming. Okay, we'll quickly go through how we can help you. So there are several ways we want to support you. and Håvard, click. So the first thing that you want to do, right, is to go to the API site and look at the documentation and the guides. There are really good how-to guides. And it looks like this. Click. Looks like this, and then you can go and push the documentation button and just learn a lot. And you will also need to have a Forma trial or a subscription to get started. And yes, click. And the secondly, like join our community. We've already shared the link to the developer forum. That's a place for you to ask all questions. Sometimes one of your colleagues, like one of your peers, will answer, but a lot of the times Håvard will answer or someone else in our team. So we're monitoring that very closely, and we love getting questions or ideas or requests. We also have a blog that's for you. So if you want to share like an idea or something that you worked on or request, you can also use that. And we also have a user forum, and that can be used, for example, to tell the user community of Forma about your extension that you're planning or asking for feedback or sharing like a teaser of it. That's also for you, and we're also monitoring that if you have questions. Next. This is the developer forum. That's how it looks like. You see our photos. Top solution author is Håvard. Well done, Håvard. And yes, please just use it, and no stupid questions. And next. Perfect. And we want to invite you also. Sometimes it's nice to meet in person. We've had a hackathon, and also you saw some of the results from that. And Philip was he was there, so he knows how it was a lot of fun. We are inviting you to click, Håvard. We have upcoming events in Boston that's coming up very shortly during the DevCon conference. And we also have, we're going to be at DevCon Munich, not hacking, but presenting. And then we have the APS accelerators, which maybe some of you have already attended, but that's a week long. It's a great way to just get your project started or finished, or yeah, just accelerate your project really. And we'll be there, and we can help you as much as you need if you join that. And it's also free, so great opportunity. And there will be more coming, of course. These are some examples. And last but not least, we're here to help. Reach out to us in the forums, ask to have a meeting with us. Yeah, we love speaking to our users and our community. So yeah, bring it on. Yes, yeah, we got a note from Philip here. It was great, he said, referring to the hackathon, I assume. Perfect. Any more Q&A that, or Q's, I guess, that we should answer? Can you give an email? So yes, you can have I'll put it in the chat, and I will let you know how to best answer, or if you should put it in the forum. Any possibility of an ACC to Forma direct connect for Revit models? From Omer. Hello, Omer. What?
So this is things we are exploring to build out. I think if you do have a I'm not personally familiar with the ACC API, but I would say if you're able to extract a Revit model from the ACC API, you could just build a Forma extension that uses the ACC APIs to push that into Forma. So you are able to call any APIs from an extension in Forma, or you can build your own backend extension that talks to both. And then the next one is there a possible connection between the Forge APIs and Forma? So the answer is kind of the same, that it's just a confusion of naming right now, that the Forge APIs, which is now called the Autodesk Platform Services APIs, or APIs for short, is the name for all of these public-facing APIs. So the Forma API is part of this API.
Yep. And I guess, yeah, I could have clarified that earlier, that the accelerators are the Forge, earlier known as Forge Accelerator, but now it's APS. Great. I think we're good on the Qs and the As.
Perhaps a question back to the attendees is, we want to make it as easy as possible to get started building your own extensions, and we're wondering if there's any resources or documentation that you either don't feel you have access to now, or that would help you get started. And if so, feel free to pop that either in the chat or write to us afterwards.